Okay. All right. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into our number 4 series of Getting to the Root of It. Series number 4, Autism. And I am Jeff Berger from Cape Coral, Florida. And we have Georgia Balsley, who is a traditional naturopath coming. She's already on. And then later on, we'll bring on Heather Woody. And we'll get some words of wisdom from her. But again, wanted to welcome you. This is a series that we do twice a month. Last month we did leaky gut, and this month is on autism, and I'll fill you in on what's going on during the month of June. But I first wanted to mention that, we are really humbled to be affiliated with the first holistic mental wellness company that's out there. And they focus on the microbiome, which is the gut-brain axis. And coming through that journey has been really exciting, exhilarating, learning an awful lot about the microbiome. For those that don't know, the microbiome project started in 2007. And just in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of science and white papers and clinical studies being posted on how the microbiome is related to all types of autoimmune diseases, as well as mental diseases, or mental, I'm going to call it mental wellness issues. Okay, so with that being said, what I'd like for you to do is, if we have time at the end of the session today, shoot some questions in the chat box. And if we have time afterwards, we'll get those questions answered. And then if not, then I'll shoot them off to the appropriate people. Just say Georgia or Heather, and we'll get them off and get them answered for you. But so moving on, I would like to introduce Dr. Georgia Balsley, a traditional naturopath from Michigan of over 30 years, who I am humbled and honored to say that she is my friend, and we are having really some incredible time in regards to doing this joint venture together. So anybody that's coming on new, please mute yourself so we don't have an echo in the background here. I'd appreciate that. Awesome. And Michelle, there we go. Super. And so joining us is again, Georgia. So Georgia, would you share a little bit with those who don't know who you are, a little bit about yourself and what really led you into naturopathic medicine?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff, for having me again, and so excited about this series. I got involved in traditional naturopathy. I'm going on my 34th year now. It's hard to believe it's been that long, but I had a medical background from the military, and actually my desire was actually to go into medicine, and it was through actually starting a family that thwarted me into alternatives, and that is where it has stood. And I now work in a functional physician's office up in Marshall, Michigan, where we see patients up there. And I really like the platform of helping the body heal on a more holistic level. I like to talk about how people come in and they're presenting check engine lights, and we don't want to put Band-Aids on those check engine lights. We want to address the root cause of where those are coming from, so that the body can help balance and people can move on with a more healthier, vibrant life.
Awesome. That's great. And by the way, thank you for your service. Really appreciate that. So as I said, last week we introduced autism, or I should say 2 weeks ago we introduced autism. It was more of a high-level overview to the viewers. And for today, we're going to learn a little bit more and go into more depth here. So one of the first questions that I have for you is, how does one reduce the symptoms of autism?
So autism is believed to kind of be a lifelong condition. However, there is some kind of interesting research out there where they feel, and there's more studies being done, that it potentially could be reversed. And so there's small children lose core symptoms after a period of time. However, there's a larger group that remain with symptomology, such as maybe flapping, learning diseases, focus, tactile response issues, being able to integrate in society, verbal communication, eye contact, that type of thing. And oftentimes, and as studies are progressing, we're now seeing a large amount of people that are growing through autism becoming adults, and because we've not had the research we have today, have gone into an adult life now with autism symptoms that have never been managed by a provider.
Awesome. And you use the phrase reverse. And, you know, what's been interesting is that on this journey, we're finding that could be the potential for many things out there. As you know, I'm going through my own journey with reversing my type 2 diabetes. And, you know, rather than going through Western medicine and staying at that so-called normal state, for me, AC1 was, 6.2 is fine. No, I need to get to 5.2, 5.6 to get off my meds. So you can do that. And there are ways out there for those that you are listening, you know, do that extra step in getting out there and getting some more information, because it's amazing what's out there, what can help you to get to that. Not that, you know, so-called, okay, this is where we have to be. No, go that extra step, because you can reverse a lot of this stuff. So the second thing is that what are some of the recommended protocols being used today that can also, you know, that, you know, you're using today in your practice with regards to this? And then talk about the, you know, we've been talking a lot about foods. So what are some of the impacts on processed foods and fast foods? How does that kind of intertwine into, you know, the autism spectrum?
Yes. So I actually kind of want to touch base when we talk about reversing. What we're saying is that doesn't mean that person doesn't have autism, just like, for example, you having diabetes. However, without managing it in a proper way, you will regain the symptoms again, right? So we want to reverse the symptomology of it so that people have more of a productive life. But one of the things that are recommended and used is actually diet, because diet plays an important role. Remember, we're talking about the gut. And so we have to remember our children are living, growing beings. And I like to say we would never go out into the would never plant a garden and go out in the garden and give it processed foods and water it down with Mountain Dew and expect to have a vibrant plant produce great things. And so it's unfortunate today that with the spawning of the diet of the sad American diet, that we've got the dollar menu at McDonald's and Burger King and all of that, as well as the dollar store, where a lot of families are shopping and buying processed, high refined, high fat, high sugar foods that really have zero nutrient value to it. So one of the things we want to look at in the gut form is to make sure that our children are eating well, especially these children as well as adults that have autism, to make sure that they're getting good nutrition. So one of the diet platforms that we look at is a gluten-free diet and a casein-free diet. So gluten is a protein that's found in specific types of grains, particularly wheat. You'll see it in rye, barley. You can see it in, actually it's in spelt bread, even though the spelt is sprouted. So you'll find gluten there. And oats have to be watched, because even though oats are considered a gluten-free grain, we have to worry about contamination. So making sure that we get more of a gluten-free type oat. And then casein is actually a protein that's found in milk. So sometimes these children not only have a casein allergy, they have a lactose intolerance. And so helping to reduce that inflammation by adjusting the diet is extremely helpful, and ridding the processed foods that have a tendency to be high in sodium, high in sugar, high in processed fats, and no nutrient value.
Wow, that's an awful lot. There's so much out there that is being discovered today in regards to foods and drinks And I had come across an article about a lot of the juices that are out there that contain arsenic. And this is really becoming high alert with a lot of people. More people I'm talking to about this, that they're finding that their kids have arsenic in their systems. And that's really scary. So on top of everything else that's going on. But, you know, on top of the foods that we're, you know, consuming and the drinks that are not good for us, the environment has a huge impact on autism and as well as stress. So can you talk a little bit about how does this stress and environmental meaning whether it's outside environmental, inside environmental, or family or friends or whatever, it's more of a social type of changes that impact autism.
Yes. So a lot of these children, when we talk about stressors, can be chemical sensitive. So things like laundry detergents, air fresheners, which actually, by the way, are laden with heavy metals, deodorants, perfumes, even things maybe as simple as petrochemicals, you know, like being around close to somebody who's maybe pumping gasoline in a car, something simple like that. And so this can actually trigger brain reactions, and it can increase the symptomology that you can see, such as, you know, being more agitated, depressed, anxiety, those type of things. And then in the other environmental factors is that they're really doing some research is taking a look at the birth model. So how was the baby born? Was it, you know, a vaginal or a cesarean birth where, you know, it's not coming through the canal, so it's not getting seeded with some good microbiome and actually being seeded with the biome of the hospital? Was the child born ill and received a lot of antibiotics, or through the development part after birth, was the child exposed to a lot of antibiotics, ear infections, sore throats, that type of thing? They're also looking at factors with the mom as far as gestation. Was it a full term compared to maybe a preemie baby or preemie delivery? Was it the mother overweight? How was the mother's diet? What did the mother have blood sugar? Was she diabetic? Was that a leading factor and a cause? So there's a lot of interesting research with no actual pinpointing. However, the top thing that I think that researchers are really noting is the birth of children and how the birth took place, and seeing that link of being with the mom and receiving biome that the mom has to inoculate that baby, to start that baby out on a fresh start with the proper biome it needs.
Right. That's amazing. And yeah, you bring up the baby microbiome and the mom's biome. I'm actually doing a little lecture at the Lee Health facility next week for moms to be and moms who just gave birth to babies about the baby microbiome. And in my studies and in my research, I found out that babies, when they're born, that they have leaky gut for the first year, allowing the mother's, you know, breast milk which has those microbiomes, get into the stomach, get into the digestive system, leak out into it, and train the baby's immune system to really develop properly. And by year one is when the gut is pretty much healed. So all those factors that you talked about, you know, anything that's going on during the birth, so forth and so on, plays a huge contributing factor to the birth of the child, whether it's C-section and or vaginally. So,
you know, the other thought too is nursing. You know, it's interesting. There's research shown for a while. So there was a period of time, there was a generation that nursed, and then they got away from nursing because we became more civilized and moms don't do that, and we feed the baby formula. And now we're digressing back to, you know, the importance of really nursing a baby. However, there's been some research done on pregnant moms that go through, you know, their checkups with their doctor. They belong to different organizations. Those moms, oftentimes, that are given birth packs before the baby is born, that are maybe led with information about bottle feeding and different kinds of formula, and that there's a high percentage of moms that ended up going to giving their children formula as opposed to those that received research on specifically nursing.
Wow.
So it's interesting, that correlation.
That's amazing. All this new science that's coming out. 2 weeks ago, we learned from Shelley that when her oldest son was born, who's 28, don't quote me on the numbers, but it was like 1 in every like 350 to 400 children would end up living with autism, and her youngest son, I think it went down to a little over 100, but today the statistics are 1 in every 59 kids that are born end up living with autism, and which is astonishing numbers. But we talked about the microbiome, and the microbiome is the new talk of today, and it is like a central location. 80% of our communications neurotransmitters are developed in the gut, and that makes the connection between the vagus nerve and the brain to make that going. And I made a correlation that our vagus nerve is basically a traffic jam, and we need to clear up that traffic jam. And, in regards to supplementation and the microbiome, we've heard from you in regards to some specific supplementation that really targets specific neurotransmitters that are geared to specific microorganisms that will aid in gut and mental health. So can you talk a little bit about how, the supplementation in regards to this plant-based supplementation in regards to the microbiome as well as autism, can you share with the viewers about that?
So there's a lot of research showing not only probiotic implantation or seeding, we like to call it seeding the gut, because there's enough research to show that children that have autism or on that autism spectrum, remember it was autism, it's changed to autism spectrum disorder, that they have a huge disparity in the biome of the gut compared to a child that doesn't have this issue. And so seeding that gut with proper probiotics is important, but you can't just use any probiotic. You have to have things that are targeted. So one of the things that's really exciting about seeding it with the probiotic that we're using is that not only is it helping seed the gut in a proper way, but it's also helping with that neural connection from the gut to the brain with the neurotransmitters, that communication, that chemical communication back and forth from the gut and brain. So things that can help with their anxiety and depression and, mood imbalances can be significantly reduced because now they're getting the proper amount of gut buddies, so to speak,
right, that
can actually speak to that brain and get the chemical connections that they're lacking.
Awesome. That's great. So we had a little pop in with a guest here. So we're at that point where I'm going to be introducing Heather Woody, who is our guest tonight, and she's from DeKalb, Illinois, and she's a rock star mama who knows what it's like in parenting, the parenting trenches. And she never really dreamed as she became the certified nurse's assistant before she got married in 1996 that she'd see the most benefit from that training within the walls of her own home. Heather is the proud mother of 3 fabulous, quirky, unique, and talented boys who also happen to be on the autism spectrum. And she is also her husband is her favorite, and I'm going to let her talk about that because I forgot the word.
ASPIE.
ASPIE. There you go. She's her favorite ASPIE. So Heather, welcome to our call tonight, and I am going to turn it over to you to share with our viewers your struggles, your victories, and what you have learned over the years in regards to living in a family with autism. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'll start with just sharing with you, ironically, it's kind of funny that you said I'm from DeKalb, Illinois, because I actually live in Bountiful, Utah, but my husband and I did live in DeKalb, Illinois for a little while.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I think I got that from your Facebook account.
that's possible.
Okay.
So when, let's see, I have 3 boys. They are now 21, 19, and 15. So about, let's see, it's been about 13 years ago, my first son was diagnosed with autism. And at that point, he was in kindergarten. And I will never forget that first parent-teacher conference. When I walked into the parent-teacher conference, and because my mom had done daycare for years and years and years, I'd been around a lot of kids. And so I knew from the get-go that he was not, quote unquote, normal. So he would do things like walk around the house. He couldn't carry on a normal conversation. He didn't make much eye contact. And the conversations that he did hold with me were very interesting because he would use phrases that he had heard from TV shows to respond to me. So he had learned how to take phrases from maybe Barney or some other show that he had seen and respond to my questions very appropriately. So the other interesting thing is it's not uncommon for kids with autism to have what they call echolalia. So there was a time in his life that literally I could drive down the street. So echolalia basically is they hear something maybe 1 or 2 times, and within a very short amount of time, they will give it back to you in the exact tone and inflection that they heard it in.
Wow.
And so I would be driving down the road and I would be hearing Barney the dinosaur or the Wiggles movie in the back seat in the exact tone and inflection, which the Wiggles being from Australia, it was like, that's the only place he's ever heard that Australian accent. So people would ask him to do it because they just loved to hear him do it. So I knew going into kindergarten that there was something very different about him. And so when I went into that first parent-teacher conference, and she said to me, can I talk to you about him? I think there's something, in her words, she says, I think there's something different. And I said to her, thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one who notices it, because he was so good at the echolalia that so many people looked at me funny when I said, something. I don't know what it is, but there's something. He had a very limited diet, which if you heard from the doctor just a few minutes ago, that it's common to cut out gluten, to cut out dairy, to cut out all these things to try and treat autism. His diet consisted of chicken nuggets, macaroni and cheese, and peanut butter sandwiches, and only cut in triangles. If you cut it in squares, he wouldn't eat it. So some of the symptoms that aren't talked about a lot is they have intense tantrums. So he would have tantrums that would last for hours on end. And it got to a point where it was just a struggle. It was difficult. And once he got to kindergarten, they did the testing and did the diagnosis, and he was diagnosed as high-functioning autistic or on the autism spectrum. Very shortly later, that was my second son. My first son had struggled with anxiety and sensory integration disorder and ADHD. And so once my other son was diagnosed, I took my first son to the doctor, and I said to him, I said, okay, doc, you take anxiety, you take sensory integration, and you take ADHD, and you add them all together, and what do you have? And he looked at me and he said, yeah, you're right. He's on the spectrum as well. Wow. Now, he didn't have as many of the social indicators, and so at that point they diagnosed him as being Asperger's syndrome, which no longer is a diagnosis. They don't call it Asperger's anymore, but within the autism community, people still refer to people as ASPIEs. who are on the higher end of the spectrum. So that's why I refer to my husband as my favorite ASPIE.
ASPIE. Got it.
So throughout the years, I went to several different doctors. I tried pharmaceuticals. I was encouraged by many pediatricians to put my boys on antidepressants, to put my boys on stimulants, to put them on sleep medications, because one of the other things that's very, very common with kids with autism is that they don't sleep, which as a mom with 3 can be interesting. One of the other things,
a mom who never sleeps.
A mom who never sleeps is exactly right. I can't tell you, I had a few times where somebody brought them back to me from somewhere because they'd wandered off. Not for lack of me trying to keep track of them, they just would wander off. Anyway, so after years and years and years of pharmaceuticals, I made the decision to finally try something different. And we started trying green tea extract. We tried the gluten-free diet. Of course, when they have such a very narrow diet of, bread and chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese, it's difficult to go gluten-free. Not to mention, it at that point was incredibly expensive because gluten-free was not common. So to find a gluten-free bread, if I was lucky, it would be $7 or $8 a loaf. And when all they'll eat is peanut butter sandwiches and you've got, maybe 10 pieces of bread in a $10 or, $8 or $10 loaf of bread, it doesn't last very long. So I was thrilled about, it's been almost a year and a half ago, I started with the Holistic Mental Wellness Company. And through that, I started out with just my boys on the natural energy drink, which has matcha and guayusa in it. And through that, the matcha and the guayusa, my youngest son was on a behavior plan at school because he had a lot of difficulty paying attention, a lot of difficulty completing work. There was a lot of behavioral issues that were happening at school. And so he was on a behavioral plan, and every day he came home with a score. So when we first started with the natural energy drink, he came home, on average, he would come home with a score of 1 out of 5 on a good day. Then shortly that went up to 2 out of 5. The nice thing about the natural energy drink is it also has the gut-brain axis blend in it. And so it doesn't necessarily feed the gut with the probiotics, but it feeds the gut-brain axis. And so the brain starts functioning better, and the body starts functioning better, and everything starts communicating better. So within about 3 months, they had added some things to his behavior plan, and he started coming home with 5 out of 6. And then he started coming home, and a bad day was 3 out of 6. It was like, hey, I'm happy to hear.
Sure.
And now after a year and a half of being just on that, and then also adding the vitamins that have the gut-brain axis and that feeding the brain good, good nutrition, I still can't feed him much of anything but chicken nuggets and, sandwiches and pizza, because he's a teenager now. So, but he's now passing all of his classes. He'll go to school early if he needs to make up his work. His behavior is just completely turned around. And in fact, it's been interesting. He, being 15, none of my other boys really cared about girls until well, they still really don't, as nearly adults. They don't care. They just would rather hang out with the guys. But my youngest son actually came to me and initiated the idea that, hey, I want to go on a date with you, and I want to know how to talk better to girls. So,
wow,
pretty incredible progress in a very short amount of time. So, some of the tips that I wanted to share with parents. The first tip I want you to know is that if you know one child with autism, or if you have one child with autism, you know one child with autism. Recognize that every child's behavior, so there's a range of things that manifest with the autism. Every single child manifests differently. And right along with those behaviors or those difficulties, there is usually a gift. So my oldest son, his gift is his gaming. He can run through a game. He does speed running in games, and he plays the games for charity. And he has learned how to manipulate the games and get through them very well. So his hand-eye coordination is just absolutely incredible. My second son, I already mentioned the fact that he has that echolalia, and so he can sing a song. He can memorize. He can memorize movies. He can memorize talks from, motivational speakers and that sort of a thing, and he can give it back to you in the exact tone and inflection that he heard it with just a couple of listens.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
Wow.
And then my youngest son, the way his has manifested, he has a talent for ballroom dance. And it's just been incredible to watch him develop and him to come into himself, because we've learned how to take those repetitive behaviors and help him direct them in a socially appropriate way. So, that's the next tip that I would say is take a look at those, quote unquote, odd behaviors and help them learn how to use those in socially appropriate ways. So for my oldest son, it's video gaming. For my second son, it's, he loves drama. He'll do drama. And he also does dance, but not as much. And for my youngest son, that's ballroom dance. So we had to find ways for them to express those different quirky behaviors in socially appropriate ways.
That's awesome. That's awesome, because Shelley's oldest son actually high functioning, graduated college with a theater degree, and he performs on stage.
That's awesome.
So it's interesting how you bring in the acting, the singing, and the dancing. And me being an ex-professional dancer in New York City, was a passion. So it really gets you into a whole different space of mind, and it's interesting how that's coming up. And well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I don't see any questions from our group out there, but what I did want to say is that as I said, this is a series, a monthly series. It is getting to the root of it, and each month we'll talk about something different. And it really focuses around the microbiome. How does the microbiome, as I said earlier, how does it play into leaky gut, which we talked last month, this month? How does it play into autism? Next month is into diabetes and depression and anxiety. So as we learn more and more, we're just going to keep sharing that with the viewers out there. And so those of you who have joined us tonight, if Heather invited you, or Dr. Georgia invited you, or I invited you, get back to us if you have any questions about tonight's video. I will be it's actually being recorded, but I will turn it up onto YouTube and have it available for those that want it. And June 6th, we're going to be talking about anxiety, depression, and June 20th, we will be talking about diabetes. So I want to thank Heather, Woody, for coming on board and being our testimonial this month, or this session here. We are humbled to have you on board. And Dr. Georgia Balsley, it's always wonderful to see you and work with you and have you on as our go-to naturopath with incredible answers and learning tools that we can take away and put into our toolbox as we continue to, move forward on this journey. So, okay, so wait, I do have a question here. So we got a few more minutes. My son is 31 and has Asperger's. Let's see. Thank you for this series. I'm really interested in the depression, anxiety upcoming presentation. Great, Michelle. Awesome. Well, you'll be on that list. We'll definitely keep you in tune with that. And thanks for joining us. So with that, yeah, I think we're going to call it a wrap. Ladies, thank you very much. Those of you who have joined us tonight, we really appreciate you coming on board, taking the time from your busy schedule to learn a little bit about autism tonight. So thanks very much. Have an awesome evening, okay?
Have a great evening.
You too.